Okay, so in this video we're checking out the HOMFPV Micron2. So this is another 2-inch Cinewhoop here with the inverted motor pusher setup, and it does look a lot like the Diatone Cinewhoop and also the one I recently reviewed from Skyzone. I think Skyzone MRC. I think it was called the Cineflex. So this one here is the second model, Cinewhoop model from HOMFPV. So you can see the branding there. And the first one was like a 2.5-inch kind of it's called the wingsuit, kind of looking like the 95X. And of course this one here is kind of looking like the Cinewhoop, but you know, the same prop size as the Beta FPV 85X V2. So I'm probably gonna get a lot of questions about that. I'll try and answer, you know, what some of the similarities and differences are, of course. So of course we have the inverted motors here. These are HOMFPV branded 1104, and they're 6500 kV, and they have this interesting kind of burnt copper paint job on them. Looks pretty sharp, and it's interesting that the labeling on the motor itself is upside down, and it's designed specifically for this model, so that's kind of interesting. So you have these 4 prop guards here with a lot of airflow to get through in here. So if you want to fly this outdoors, do flips and rolls, that kind of thing, if you're into that, this configuration is better. However, if you want to fly it indoors, they do have these bumpers that you can't stick on. They have these 3M adhesive that you can stick these on, and just it goes very uneasily. Just remove that adhesive and it'll just stick onto the plastic. But you know, you only need that if you're going to be flying indoors and you want to protect, you know, furniture or objects or people from getting hit, and that's what these are for. But it does change the airflow characteristics of the drone, and when you have the sides here blocked off a little bit, it tends to be a little bit more unstable. So if you're trying to do flips and rolls indoors, then you're probably not going to have a good time. That's why if you're going to be doing any kind of acro, you should be flying it without the bumpers on. But if you're flying indoors, I'm assuming most of the guys are just going to be cruising around kind of level, and then the instability from these bumpers shouldn't be as apparent if you're not doing any kind of acro indoors. So the flight controller on here is an all-in-one, specifically designed for this frame, and it's pretty unique design. So what you have here is a 20 by 20 mounting. So you can see it's diagonal here, and it goes there, and there's a screw there and one there. So the 20 by 20 is actually diagonal, and it's because the flight controller is sitting here on top, and it's totally custom for this frame. And you can see the screws that go through to the Vista unit here, also 20 by 20. So those 20 by 20 screws go all the way through to the bottom here, and then there's like a little bit of like glue or adhesive or something here holding on that nut so it doesn't come loose. And you can see the Vista is right there, right below the all-in-one flight controller, which is single board F4 flight controller plus 20 amp all-in-one ESC. And I know a lot of you guys are like, well, can you use this in anything else? Maybe if you have something that can mount a 20 by 20 and rotated 45 degrees like that, because you can see that the board shape is basically lined up to where the ducts are, so it's like curved. So it's really specifically designed for this particular frame. Like, I think that's going to be the main difference between this one and something like the 85X, which is kind of like repurposed from basically like a regular whoop format to an inverted whoop format, whereas this was designed from the ground up like this, with the custom board and the Vista centered like this, which is better for CG. So everything here is basically designed from the ground up to fit this particular frame. So some advantages to that. I mean, it's very solid. You can see that there's these screws that go into the prop guards here. There's 2 here for this one. There's 2 for this one here, and then also on the bottom, very thin, I think it's 2mm carbon fiber with a lot of cutouts, as you can see, on the top and the bottom. And so these bottom and top plates with the screws along with the prop guards makes this extremely stiff. It doesn't bend at all. So you know, one of the things I was kind of worried about, because it doesn't give it all, is that like, you know, like some of those whoop frames, is that if you hit something really hard, even though this is fairly strong plastic. It's a fairly strong injection molded plastic. You could break these. I have seen people break the ones on the Diatone Cinewhoop, and those are pretty strong too. So you never know how hard, if you crash hard enough or hit something indoors, then you fall, say 20 feet to the ground on concrete. Yeah, you could possibly break one of these. However, they don't include extras of these, so you have to somehow source these somewhere else. I haven't seen where you can get these, probably on their website, but they're still ramping up production on this one, so a lot of the spare parts I haven't seen out yet. But yeah, I wish they would have included at least one or two extra one of these prop guards in the box, because it isn't included. So I thought that was kind of a glaring oversight in my opinion. It's something that, some people will break these eventually, and it's nice to have spares of these, because if you break one, you just swap it in. I think it's just 3 screws here, and then 3 on the bottom, and then you just pull it out. Obviously, you have to dismount the motor and put that back on, but it's not a big deal. And you have a new prop guard on there. So as long as you're not doing anything too crazy, you should be okay. But you never know. You have a fail-safe, whatever. You run something accidentally. Accidents do happen, and so something like this could possibly break. Now you have these nice metal guards here for the camera, and obviously we have the Kedix Nebula Nano camera here. So it's a nano-sized mount here, 14 millimeters, along with the Vista unit. DJI camera does not look like it will fit in this model. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to ask me about that. Yeah, doesn't look. Looks like that's a non-starter there. So for this one here, it's going to be the Nebula Nano camera, but it looks like it's got the latest firmware in there. So the image isn't terrible like it was on the original version, but it isn't nearly as good as the DJI camera. But it is lighter as well, which is what you want for this 2-inch setup. It does come with a stock Cadix antenna here, although I've seen stock photos of this one from, I think from Banggood, and it was a different antenna. It's a HOMFPV antenna. I think it's a little bit lighter. So this might be still like one of the early batches, and it has the original Cadix antenna. You can see here, wire comes down that way and plugs into the micro FL connector right there. Now, out of the box, this antenna was all the way inserted into this TPU piece here, so it was basically flush right here. I pulled it out a little bit because when this tube is all the way pushed in, it blocks the USB ports. You have to pull this out a little bit, otherwise you're not going to have access to that USB port, so keep that in mind. It is a micro USB port, and again, totally custom board here. As you can see, the USB port is in a very unusual spot here in the rear on the underside of that board. So this board is totally custom made just for this model and not likely to be usable in other models. So in terms of accessing the USB-C port on the Vista, it's right here. You can see there, and it is a little bit recessed, so you might be able to get in there with your normal USB-C cable, but they have included in the box an adapter. Okay, so this is kind of unique, and you're probably going to need this. Is a USB-C adapter here. So this is the end that goes into the USB-C port here on the Vista. And you got to be careful putting that in. It's kind of tricky. You have a weird angle here, and the prop gets a little bit in the way. And then you have the connector here. You're going to plug in your USB cable from your PC or Mac into here, and that way you can activate the Vista Air unit and do the firmware update, of course, like you have to do with all these. So you have to use this end here. This is included in the box. If you don't have this, then you're going to have a hard time getting access to that USB-C port. Where to go? Yeah, right there, to be able to do the activation and the firmware updates. So you're going to have to use this, to keep that in mind. Now the rest of the stuff that's in the box, you have a Insta360 Go mount here, which you can put on here on the base, and this is the naked GoPro mount that's also included. This is the one I've added, and you see a screw there that's included in the package. To mount this isn't mounted out of the box. This comes in the box. You have to mount that yourself, or you can mount the Insta360 Go mount. Get some stickers. Get a spare set of the props, the Hulky 2036. And 4-bladed props. The spares are purple. The ones that are on here are green. You may want to try the 2023 Gem Fans instead. It's a 3-bladed prop. If you want maybe a little bit more flight time. Although I have no idea how the tune would be on that one. I didn't try it, but it seemed fine. The tune seemed fine on this one, at least out of the box. And then you get a documentation here on the connections on the flight controller. So you have your RX1 here and you have RX2 down here. Not easily accessible, as you can see. So the RX2 connections here for the MSP for the Vista are down here. And then if the wiring for the S-Bus on the Vista is already wired up to the flight controller, so I just use the DJI controller, but RX1 is over here, those 4 pads right here. Getting in there to solder up a crossfire receiver or something is going to be a little bit tricky. I thought, oh, we just have to remove this top plate here, but then this screw here, these 4 screws go through the flight controller, through the Vista on the other end. So I haven't quite figured out what would be the best way of getting around that. Probably going to have to remove that screw from the flight controller and the Vista, and then you can remove the whole top plate. So basically it's like a whole ton of screws here. Looks like at least 10, 12 screws. Get the top plate up to access those pads for the wiring up a separate receiver like a crossfire. So if you want to do a separate receiver, it looks like it's going to be a bit tricky. You also get this nice little carrying bag that the wingsuit came with as well, so you can store your drone in here if you want. That's included in the box. And of course the foam bumpers. And that's pretty much everything that was in the box. You can see here that the battery connection and the capacitor right there is in the front, opposite of the USB port. It is a little bit cumbersome here once you put the naked GoPro in here to plug in the battery, because the battery does take up a fair amount of space. I used 2 different ones here. 3S is what's recommended, 3S 650 to 850, because it is a 6500 kV. You might be able to do 4S if you put in like a throttle limit, although I didn't really experiment with that. I would say maybe like a 80% throttle limit should work on 4S. If you don't do that, you're probably going to get a flyaway if you try and arm it on 4S, because it is tuned for 3S. So just keep that in mind. So definitely, if you're going to do 4S, do use the throttle limit for sure. But I use this 523S here. You can see it takes up all the space here on top, and the battery does go front and back here. Although I wish they would have changed the design here so that it could go sideways. And I may try and do something about that later, because I prefer sideways batteries on the smaller whoops anyway. The other battery I used was this GMB 3S 1100. It's a low C rating, and this does draw a fair amount of amps, so it does get pretty warm, but you get a longer flight time. So on the 520, it was a pretty short flight time, like 2.5 minutes, and I ran it all the way down. And then this one here, I think I flew at 3.5 minutes and still had some juice left in this one, but didn't really feel like pushing this battery, because this is really meant for like a low amp draw type of application, not really this one here. And I didn't have anything like in the 750 to 850 3S range, and that's a battery size I don't use very often. So those batteries might be a little bit harder to find, especially ones that are going to fit this one here. So I'll try and find some and link them down in the description, but these are the ones I use. I'll link these as well. And then the naked GoPro that I used, you can use like basically the Beta FPV V2 case, or this one here from Flywoo. This is the pre-built GoPro Hero 7 naked, already stripped down, and this does fit the mount, no problem. So if you are going to use a setup, you have to either take it apart and get power from the battery leads, or you need to have some sort of basically I made like a pigtail that plugs into the balance lead of the battery to give power to the BEC on the naked GoPro. I'll make another video later. That's a separate topic, not really without a scope on this video. But if you are interested in that, let me know, because I know a lot of people that are already in the naked GoPro group on Facebook. They already know how to do this. But if you don't know how to power this without soldering to the battery leads on the flight controller, let me know if you're interested in that video, and I can make that. But yeah, I made a little custom piece that plugs into here and then into the balance lead of the battery, and that's how I powered my naked GoPro. And let me just show you lastly how much everything weighs. Alright, so there's the drone, no battery, 114.4 grams. And then if you want to use the foam bumpers, it's going to take you up to 118.5. And then with the naked GoPro, no battery, we're at 145.4 grams. With the naked GoPro and a 520 3S, 187.6 grams. And then with the 3S 1100 milliamp hour battery, this is probably the recommended configuration. We're at 210.9 grams, so almost at 211 grams. So you probably want something like a 3S 850. It's probably going to weigh something similar to this one, but a little bit, or it'll be a little bit higher C rating, probably like 160C or something like that. So that's yeah, you're definitely well under the 250 gram limit if you're concerned about that. And this is probably going to be mostly for indoor situations. And if you're going to do that, if you want to protect things indoors, use the bumpers, but I don't think that's totally necessary. And if you want to fly it outdoors, fly it without the bumpers, and you have better airflow and less instability issues for this particular size. But in terms of the flight characteristics, PID tune, everything came PID tuned out of the box. Thought it flew pretty decently. Yeah, and it reminded me of it was a very similar flight feel to the wingsuit. I don't think you have to worry too much about that unless you have specific types of things that you need to work on for or use these Cinewhoops for. You may want to alter the tune a little bit, but you can probably just get away with just adjusting the rates. And so you just add a lot of expo, which is what I did, and you get a nice smooth flight. So I think that's pretty much it for this model. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions about this one, if you want to see a video on how to power the naked GoPro from any of these Cinewhoops, let me know. And here's the flight footage, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.